In today's lesson, we are going to factor polynomials. So up until this point, you have learned what a polynomial is, you've done standard form, you've combined like terms, you've added, subtracted, and you multiplied. And you multiplied by either distributing or by foiling. So what factoring is it's kind of like reverse foiling, and it's like dividing our polynomials. So you're going to see that we're also going to bring in that x game or that x method that we used in the beginning of the week, because we do have to think about finding numbers that multiply to one of the given numbers and add to another. But to kind of explain factoring, I want to review a FOIL problem. So this is a problem you did last week. So if I said let's multiply x minus 10 times x plus 3, if you remember, foiling would be just take x and multiply it to x, so that would give me x to the second. Take x and multiply it to 3, so that would give me a positive 3x. Then I would go inside and do negative 10 times x, that's a negative 10x. And take negative 10 times 3, and that would give me a negative 30. So remember, FOIL was first, outer, inner, last. I'd multiply all those terms together, and then I would combine like terms. So in the middle I have a positive 3 minus 10. So my final answer would be x to the second minus 7x minus 30. So 3 minus 10 gave me that negative 7 in the middle, and this was my final answer. All right, so when we multiply two polynomials like this, right, that's like that method of FOIL. But what we're going to do is factor, and factoring I want you to think of as like reverse FOIL. So factoring, what's going to happen today is I'm going to give you this, x squared minus 7x minus 30, and I want you to go backwards and tell me that that's made of x minus 10 times x plus 3. So factoring is like going backwards. So if we just take a second and kind of look at the numbers we started with. So if I were to give you this problem, I have x to the second minus 7x minus 30. So let's look at these numbers that end up in the answer, and let's look at the original numbers we started with. Okay, I have a negative 7 and I have a negative 30. Well, let's see, I have a negative 10 and a 3. Wouldn't I get a negative 30 if I did negative 10 times 3? So isn't negative 10 times 3 negative 30? And if I take negative 10 and add it to 3, don't I get a negative 7 in the middle? So you should start to see that this is kind of looking like that x method, right? Weren't you looking for two numbers that multiplied to one number and added to another? So that's how we're going to figure out what these missing numbers are in our factored expression. So to factor a polynomial in standard form, if you have something like x to the second plus some number bx plus some number c, you want to find two numbers that multiply to c and add to b. Basically, what multiplies to the last number and adds to the middle number. And I want you to use the x method to help find these numbers. So when you're factoring on your paper, for each problem, what I want to see you have written is that x method. Right? So if I'm looking at an expression, x squared plus bx plus c, I'm going to set up the x method to factor, and I'm going to say, okay, what multiplies to that last term, which is c, what adds to that middle term, which is b. And then those are going to be the two numbers that you find, just the same method you did in the video before. And when I factor this, the way you're going to give me the answers is it's always going to be x plus whatever the one number is you found, and x plus whatever the other number is you found. Now those numbers could be positive or negative, and if that's the case, it might look like x minus a number, kind of like up here when it was x minus 10, x plus 3. All right, so whatever these numbers are, in the x game you did on Delta Math, you stopped here. You just plugged those two numbers in and you moved on. Now what we're going to do is take these two numbers and write them into what's called this factored form. Okay, so you just want to make sure that these two numbers multiply to your last term and add to your middle term. So let's look at a couple of examples. All right, so let's look at x to the second plus 11x plus 18. So if I said factor each trinomial, okay, this is a trinomial because it has 1, 2, 3 terms. Tri means 3. Let's see, I'm looking for two numbers. I'm going to set it up just like I did up here. So I want to see you draw your x. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to the last term, which is 18, so that should go at the top. And I'm looking for them to multiply to 18, and I want them to add to that middle term, which is an 11. Okay, so I need two numbers that multiply to 18 and add to 11. So use the same method you did in your X game. You know, if you want to start listing out pairs of numbers, right? I could have like 1 and 18. Let's see, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. They all multiply to 18. Well, which of these pairs of numbers is also going to add to 11? It's going to be 2 and 9. Right, so if I have a 2 and a 9, right? 2 times 9 is 18. 2 plus 9 is 11. Now, this isn't where you're going to stop. Today, we're going to write our answers back in the form I would have given you if I had asked you to FOIL. So to fill these expressions in, we're always going to have an X in the first parenthesis and an X in the second parenthesis. And then when you plug these numbers in, I want you to use the sign that goes with them. So this is a positive 2 and a positive 9. So when I put this into factored form, it's going to look like X plus 2 and X plus 9. And that is your answer. Now, a question I get a lot is, does the order matter? No, it doesn't. You just have to have the correct sign with each number. So I could also write this as X plus 9 times X plus 2. Those are the same thing. Okay, so the order doesn't matter. What matters is that you have the correct sign with those numbers. Now, my directions do say to check by FOIL. So if I want to check, right, I want to take the answer that I think I factored and I want to FOIL this out and make sure I get what I started with, which was x squared plus 11x plus 18. So x times x is x squared, x times 9 is 9x, 2 times x is 2x, and 2 times 9 is 18. So if I combine like terms, 9 plus 2, I get x to the second plus 11x plus 18, which is what I started with. So I am good. My factored form here is x plus 2 times x plus 9, or x plus 9 times x plus 2. Okay, let's look at a couple more examples here. All right, I have x to the second minus 5x plus 4. So again, the first thing you want to do is set up your x method. I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to a positive 4 and add to a negative 5. All right, so we talked about this before. The only way to multiply to a positive number is to have two positives or two negatives. That sign at the bottom tells you that they should both be negative numbers. So the numbers that multiply to get 4, let's see, we have 1 and 4 and 2 and 2. Okay, if both of them are negative, 1 and 4 are the only pair that will also add to a negative 5. So my numbers here are negative 1 and negative 4. So if I want to factor this, I want to use parentheses. I want to put an x in the first spot of each parentheses, and I want to use their signs with each number. So I'm going to fill this in as x minus 1 times x minus 4. And this is factored form of this expression. And again, what I want you to do is make sure you check by FOIL. So once you think you have an answer, I want to see that you FOILed it back out. So x times x is x to the second. X times minus 4 is minus 4x. Negative 1 times x is negative 1x. And negative 1 times negative 4 is a positive 4. If I combine like terms, I get x to the second. Negative 4 minus 1 is a negative 5x plus 4. X squared minus 5x plus 4 is what I started with. So this answer is good. And again, you could have written it as x minus 4 and x minus 1. The order doesn't matter. What matters is that the signs are with the correct numbers. All right, let's look at number 3. X to the second minus 6x minus 27. Okay. This time I want to multiply to a negative 27 and add to a negative 6. So I'm multiplying to a negative, which means one of my numbers has to be positive, the other has to be negative. So I just want to make sure that when I add my two numbers, I get a negative 6. Pairs of numbers that give you 27, Let's see, 1 times 27, 3 times 9. I can definitely get a -6 from a 3 and a 9. So if I put those in, one of these needs to be negative. If 3 was negative, 9 plus -3 would be a +6. I need this to be negative, so I'm going to make sure the 9 is negative. -9 plus 3 is -6. So when I factor this, that's a +3 and a -9. I'm going to factor this to make sure it says x plus 3 times x, oops, I'm going to rewrite that on the next line. Messed up there. Okay, x plus 3 and x minus 9. Okay, make sure you have an x in the first spot. I have a +3 and a -9. All right, now again, the order doesn't matter. You just have to make sure you have the signs correct. So you could have also written it as x minus 9 times x plus 3. All right, again, these are the same thing. The order doesn't matter, but the sign has to be correct with each number. Okay, if I want to do a quick check, if I did x minus 9 times x plus 3, see, x times x is x squared, x times 3 is 3x, -9 times x is -9x, -9 times 3 is -27. Combine like terms, 3 and -9. I get x to the second minus 6x minus 27, which is what I started with. All right, so the last two examples I want to go over with have kind of something special going on in the middle, and you just want to be aware of this when you are factoring. In number 4, I want you to factor x to the second plus x minus 56. So remember, whenever you see just a plus x, or in number 5, maybe you see a minus x, I don't see a coefficient there. Don't think that it's 0, all right? You want to actually put in a little 1 there. That's x to the second plus 1x minus 56. So in number 4, I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to a -56 and add to a +1. So it's not a 0, it's a 1 that they have to add to. All right, so we can play around with some numbers. You can say, all right, what pairs give you 56? Well, there's 1 and 56. You could have 2 and 28, 4 and 14, 7 and 8. Remember, we're looking for a pair of numbers that could give us a 1. So 7 and 8, I could get a 1 from a 7 and an 8. They need to multiply to a negative number. So one of them has to be negative. I want them to add to a +1. So the only way that's going to happen is if the 7 is negative, because -7 plus 8 would give me a +1. That's really a +8. So when I fill this in factored form, I'm going to have x minus 7 times x plus 8 as my factored form. All right, again, order doesn't matter. You could have written it as x plus 8 followed by x minus 7. It's the same thing. Make sure you're doing those checks before you hit submit. All right, so I'm going to FOIL x minus 7 with x plus 8. X times x is x squared. X times 8 is 8x. -7 times x, -7x. And -7 times 8, -56. Plus 8 minus 7. That's definitely going to give me that 1x in the middle, minus 56, so that works, okay? And in my last example, okay, if I have x to the second minus x minus 6, well, just like I put a 1 in my other example, I'm going to put a 1 in front of the x here, but since it's negative, that means when I fill in my x method, I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to a -6 at the end, and this time they have to add to a -1 in the middle. So my pairs of numbers that multiply to 6, see, I could have 1 and 6 or 2 and 3. But if I need to get a -1, the 2 and the 3 are the only ones that are going to get that. So if I have a 2 and a 3, one of them needs to be negative. So the only way that's going to work is if 3 is negative. 2 plus a -3 gives me a -1. And again, if you need to put a plus there to make sure you remember that's what you're plugging in, do that. And this factors to x plus 2 times x minus 3. All right, and again, I'm going to do a quick check. You should always be checking. Okay, I want to FOIL out x plus 2 with x minus 3. X times x is x squared. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. 2 times x is 2x. And 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. If I combine those like terms, negative 3x plus 2x does give me a negative 1x minus 6, which matches my original problem, so I am good. Okay, so the biggest mistakes I see with factoring are mixing up your signs. And believe it or not, some people forget to put the x in the factored form. Some people just write like plus 2 minus 3. You want to write it as the variable x plus or minus the number that you are substituting into that expression.